Welcome back to Reclining at Table with Jesus. We are considering how the Lord, by His grace, can work through our difficulties and our testings and our trials and our sufferings, and how He can take a painful and bitter situation and make it into a good and a blessing. We've seen how He can reveal Himself to us in them times, how He refines us in those times. But in this episode, I want us to consider how He can take away the love of the world and how He can give us a longing to be with Him in heaven. We are prone as human beings to find our rest and our home in the world, yet the Bible tells us that we are exiles and strangers and aliens, and that we are travelling through this life to be with Him forever in the new heaven and the new earth. But yet we find our rest here. Like Peter on the Mount of Transfiguration, we are prone to build tents and find our rest here and say, Lord, it's a good thing to be here. Sometimes, like Jonah, we are happy when we've built our tents and a plant grows over our tent and it gives us shade from the scorching heat, that we find rest. But the Lord then often sends a worm to come and eat our plants, so that we wouldn't find rest in this world. Or like Jeremiah chapter 2 verse 13, we love to dig out our own cisterns, our own pots, and fill them with dirty water. We're happy drinking the water until the Lord sends a heat to evaporate our water, until we go to Him, the fountain of life. Sometimes He sends the worm to eat our comfort and our plants, so that we would find in Him our shelter and our shade. Under the shade of the Almighty we were meant to be. And sometimes He sends a wind to blow over our tent, so we would find in Him our refuge and our strong tower. So sometimes think of the people of Israel. If they weren't going through a difficult time of oppression by Pharaoh and difficulty in Egypt, they would never listen to Moses and never wanted to come out of that slavery. If they were comfortable, they would have never listened to Him. It was in that oppression, in that difficulty, did they long to leave that place and go to the promised land. And this is what you find back in Hebrews chapter 12. So if you want to come with me, you will see that all the people of faith are looking forward to the city whose builder and designer is God. So Abraham chapter 11 verse 8 was called to leave his homeland and to go to a place not knowing where he was going. But in verse 10, he wasn't just thinking about the earthly promised land. In verse 10, he was looking forward to the city whose foundation and builder and designer was God. You will see the same thing in chapter 12 verse 2 with Jesus. It's not just the people of the Old Testament in the past who were looking forward to this city. Jesus also was looking forward, who for the joy that was set before Him endured the cross. So what enabled Him to go through the difficult time was that He was looking forward to something that was bringing Him joy. And we need to ask, what was that thing? And I think verse 2 answers it. It says, He despised its shame and He's seated at the right hand of His Father. He was homesick. Abraham was homesick. Jesus was homesick. They were looking forward because they knew that this world wasn't where they were meant to be. They were waiting for the new heaven and the new earth. You will see the same thing again in chapter 13 and verse 12. It tells us that Jesus went outside of the city. He went outside the gate. And then it tells us in verse 13 to follow Jesus and let's go to Him outside the camp, outside of the city, outside of this world. For verse 14, here's the motivation. For here we have no lasting city, but we seek the city that is to come. So sometimes the Lord will send the wind and the worm and the heat upon His people, not because He doesn't love us, because He loves us deeply, but He knows that we're prone to find our comfort and our peace and our hope in this world. And we can only ever find it in Jesus and the new heaven and the new earth. This is what Jesus says in John chapter 14 verse 1. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many rooms, and if it was not so I would have told you. But I go and prepare a place, then I'll come back for you, for where I am, you also will be. We were created to be with Jesus, enjoy Him forever in a new heaven and a new earth. But we're prone. Our hearts are prone to find rest in the world, in our own systems, in our own little tent, in our own little plants. And the Lord encourages us through the disciplines and the tests and the trials to motivate us not to look back or to look down, but to look forward to the city who's got sure foundation, whose builder and designer is God. So I want to encourage you, like Paul in Philippians 1 verse 21, he says to live is Christ, to die is gain. And then he would say in verse 22 and 23 and a bit on that he was hard pressed between the two, to stay or to go. But he says that he's going to stay. But he does say that it's better to go. His desire is to go and be with Christ, which is better by far. And in chapter 3 verse 14 he says he presses on to the upward call of God, because our citizenship is in heaven, verse 20 and 21. So I want to encourage you to keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. Keep walking to him. Let him be your shade. Let him be your shelter. Let him be your foundation. Let him be your fountain. And don't look back. And keep traveling to him until he wipes every tear away from your eye and creates a new heaven and a new earth. But maybe, like Moses, like Elijah, like Jonah today, you've said, I've had enough and I want to depart out of this world. I'm ready to go. And I just want to encourage you, if you need to talk to somebody, get in touch. Please get in touch, because Satan took Jesus to a high building and told himself to jump off. He said, go on, from the pinnacle of the temple, Matthew 4 verse 5 and 6, jump off. And sometimes he tempts his people because of the difficulty of the situations we find ourselves in, and he tells us to jump. And I want to encourage you to come to Jesus and don't jump. Let Jesus lead you through the difficulties of this wilderness, through the world, and let him decide when it's time for you to go home. But please, if you're in that position, get in touch with somebody that can talk to you and listen. But please trust Jesus, walk with Jesus, and just let him be in control of your future. So may the Lord bless you today. Amen.